What's up, everybody? Smooth Cosplayer here, your favorite salsa dancing cosplayer. Last month, June, marked 20 years since X-Men debuted in the theaters. Now, leading up to that, knowing it was coming out, being an X-Men fan, being a fan of the comics, being a fan of the cartoon when it came out, I was very excited to know that we finally were getting a movie. Went to see it, and I did enjoy the movie. And in hindsight, I do admit that it helped pave the way for the series of comic book movies we have now. It's very monumental, very influential, but at the time it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth watching it, because this was my first time going through what a lot of my fellow geeks go through, which is, you know, you have your favorite fandom and it gets transferred to a different medium, whether it's from comic book to movie, comic book to TV show, video game to TV show. You know, basically anytime your fandom goes from one medium to another, things get changed. And for me, watching X-Men, I was pissed off a lot watching the movie. Like, I was like, why did they change this? Why did they change that? Why is this different? Why did they add this? Why did they take this away? Why didn't they feature this? All so on and so forth. Since then, you know, my mindset has changed about, you know, when things get changed, when your thing gets made into a movie, what have you. I'm not saying I don't get a little angry every now and then. I'm not saying there's things that I don't like, but I no longer have the same outrage, the same just pissed offness that I used to have. And basically this video is going to be I'm going to take you guys through my journey of how I got there, how I went from pissed off fanboy to guy that kind of just accepts that these things are going to happen. And, you know, you may like some things, you may not, but it's not worth the vitriol and the poison that we spew at the directors and the creators when they come out. So yeah, this is my, I guess, growth, fandom, maturity video on changes in movies. So let's go back to the X-Men, because this is where it all started for me. So, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the details with X-Men, because what I'm actually going to do is, I know I say this a lot. I know I always say I'm going to save this thing for another video, save that thing for another video, and I don't always deliver on that, but I'm actually going to do it with this one, because I have one more movie to watch. I've been, in the past few weeks, watching all the X-Men movies from the first one to the last, so that way I can do a video on just all the things that I did and didn't like on these movies. Now that might seem like a contradiction to the video I'm doing now, but really that video is just going to be me getting it all out of my system kind of thing. So, but anyway, yeah, that's why I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the minor details of X-Men. But I will say that, again, when X-Men came out, I did enjoy it, I did like it, but there were just so many things that I was like, why did you change this? Why did you change that? You really effed that up, all that kind of thing. So now, I did still watch every X-Men movie that came out. You know, I still did enjoy it, but I also still did, you know, get pissed off about this detail and that detail. What X-Men did for me was it prepared me for the next fandom movie that I like, which is Transformers. Transformers was my first fandom, but X-Men is like my favorite now. But Transformers was my first love. What X-Men did for me was it prepared me for the same thing as Transformers. I went into Transformers knowing, hey Myron, turn your fanboy off. When you walk in the door, leave your fanboy at the door. Just enjoy the scene for what it is. So that really helped me enjoy Transformers. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't still make mental note of pretty much everything that I felt was wrong, everything that didn't get right, everything they changed for no really good reason with Transformers. I actually wrote a blog about every Transformers movie. Well, not everyone, because I stopped with the fourth one, Age of Extinction. So the first three Transformers movies I have a blog about, as far as like all the stuff I didn't like, all that good stuff. So I'm at the point when I'm watching this series of movies rather, I'm at a point where I can enjoy the movie. I know to not expect them to get anything right, but I'm still taking note of what I felt they didn't get right. moving on to G.I. Joe. At this point, I have even less faith that the creators are gonna get things right, so to speak. Still enjoyed it. Again, made mental note of everything. So at this point, I'm used to movie versions of certain things, just botching everything, dropping the ball, everything like that. Now, here comes The Walking Dead. Now, The Walking Dead, I knew it was a comic book, but I didn't pick up on it. And it got made into a TV show. My roommate put me on to it, and I got hooked. But I knew it was a comic book, and watching the show made me want to go back and see what was up with the comics. Okay, so this is where things started turning around for me, because I seem to instinctively know that, you know, if you're a fan of the comics, I wasn't at the time, but if you're a fan of the comics and then you start watching this show, if they keep everything the same in the show from the comics, then everybody who read the comics is going to know exactly what's happening. There's no suspense. There's no they're basically, they're just gonna know what's happening. And it's like, why would they do that? Why would you keep everything the same and have all the comic fans just already knowing what's happening? If they're watching it with somebody who didn't read the comics, they're spoiling it for them, all that kind of stuff. Like, you basically have a big spoiler if you read the comics. So in my mind, I'm like, yes, they have to change certain things. They have to tweak this storyline, tweak that character a little bit. They have to keep it fresh so that, you know, I mean, new fans are going to be new fans, and they're going to love it or they're going to not love it. But the old fans from the comics, they're like, okay, we need to keep it fresh so that way we keep them on their toes too. And so I started, as I went back to, like I said, the TV show got me interested in the comics. Now, I didn't start collecting a whole bunch of Walking Dead comics. I would pick up a volume from here or there. Sometimes if I was in Barnes & Noble, I would, you know, if I had time to kill, I would sit and read one in the store. I would also go to the Walking Dead wiki page, or the wiki fandom page rather, and I would read about the next storyline that was coming up on the TV show, you know, just so I could kind of get a feel for what was about to happen, so I know what got changed, all that good stuff. So I started looking at the Walking Dead TV show as just a alternate reality universe or alternate timeline of the comics. You know, the same general thing happens, but, you know, this little minor thing gets changed. This thing still happens, but it happens differently. This character is a mix of these other characters from the comics, or this character doesn't exist in the comics. This character is in the comics but doesn't exist in the show. All those types of things. So I just really started to look at it like an alternate timeline or alternate universe version of what the comics is, just its own continuity. Looking at that made me go back further and realize that this same thing has been happening for a while. This isn't new. This isn't just some new thing that I came across. It's, you know, just the barriers are broken in my mind, but this thing has always been happening. If you look back again to, you know, my beloved X-Men, I, like a lot of people, I was a big fan of the cartoon X-Men, the animated series. And even though Transformers is my first love, Transformers is my first favorite cartoon, X-Men, the animated series, has taken over for me as my favorite. It is taken over as my favorite cartoon of all time. Now, I had limited knowledge of the comics before the cartoon came out. I started getting into X-Men. I started getting into X-Men maybe about 2 years before the cartoon came out, and I didn't get a steady allowance, so I wasn't able to really collect comics. So I got comics here and there. I never got like 2 issues in a row. I remember the Executioner song came out shortly after the cartoon came out. Executioner song, it was a crossover series between all the X titles, and I only was able to I got the 3rd issue first, and I was able to go back and get some other ones. I only had issues 1 through 4. Didn't get issues 5 through, I think, 16 until adulthood. Anyway, I say all that to say I had limited knowledge of the comics, so I wasn't like I knew about every single storyline, all this kind of stuff. But I knew enough to know that when X-Men the animated series came out, I knew enough to know that some things had gotten changed. For instance, the original 5 X-Men, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, Angel, Iceman, those were the original X-Men, but those were not the X-Men that were popular at that time. So, at that time, Wolverine, Gambit, Psylocke, even though she wasn't in the cartoon but for like 5 minutes, Jubilee, Storm, a lot of those characters, those were the hot ones at the time. And I automatically knew that if they were to have started the cartoon where the original comic started at, it wouldn't have gone well. Because if you guys don't know about the original 5 X-Men, that series almost got like legit canceled. It got to a point where it just wasn't selling good, and they were just doing reruns, the comic equivalent of reruns at some point, until the mid-70s, where they did the giant size X-Men. That's where Storm, Wolverine, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Banshee, Thunderbird, Sunfire, all of them, they debuted, and then that's when it kind of picked up. So yeah, if they would have started with the original 5, it would not have done well. And also, just going off of the roster that they went with, they couldn't remake every storyline exactly the same. They had to tweak some things here and there. And for some reason, I just naturally understood that back then. And going back as an adult and reading some of the older X-Men comics from when I was from before my time, the ones that came out before I was even alive, I go back and I read those, and I start to realize that the cartoon did a very good job of adapting older storylines with what they had. So I'm looking at X-Men the animated series, and I'm like, it was a dope cartoon. It didn't stay. Now, the same general things happened in the cartoon, just maybe not the same order, maybe not the same timeline, maybe not with the same people, but they did a very good job of adapting those things. So there were changes there. That made me go back and dig even further back to my childhood days, looking at Transformers, looking at G.I. Joe. Transformers, the toys, not the toys, the cartoon and the comic book came out at the same time, and they didn't keep the same continuity. Now, I grew up with the cartoon, didn't grow up with the comic. I might have got my hands on 1 or 2 comics, and the ones that I did, it was drastically different. I'm like, who was this character named? I think his name was Backstreet. I think his name was. I'm looking at him. I'm like, I didn't see him in the cartoon. Like, where did this come from? There was Buster Witwicky instead of Spike Witwicky, and I'm like, who is this guy? Why is his name not Spike? And as an adult, I found out, okay, this is a completely different continuity, completely different timeline. So we got the same characters, but nothing happens the same. There is no comic book issue that correlates specifically with an episode in the cartoon. Completely different continuity. So kind of keeping with what I came to the conclusion of with The Walking Dead, the Transformers cartoon and the Transformers comic, completely different, not universes, completely different continuities there. So same thing, and now same characters, but some of these characters are different. Like Grimlock started off being a bad A in the cartoon, but him and the Dinobots eventually became comic relief in the cartoon, whereas they stayed bad A's. They stayed like just your these super awesome bad A characters in the comic book. And Grimlock was the only one in the comics out of the Dinobots who had a speech impediment. He was none of the Dinobots in the cartoon. None of the Dinobots in the comic book were dumb. They were dumb as bricks in the cartoon, but they were competent in the comic book. And only Grimlock had that speech impediment. Shockwave was this uber loyal, like like yes man to Megatron in the cartoon. In the comics, he overthrew Megatron just because he was just so driven by logic, and his logic drove him to think, oh, I'm a better leader than Megatron, he gotta go. So like those are just a few examples, like same characters, but they're a little different, they get remixed a little bit. Same thing happened with G.I. Joe. I grew up on the cartoon, not the comics. Now the comics existed way before the cartoon came out for G.I. Joe. So naturally, just like with Transformers, even though the cartoon and the comics came out at the same time, G.I. Joe, because of the time difference, they had no choice but to be a different continuity. And again, just like with Transformers, there is no issue in the comics that correlates specifically with the episode in the cartoon. So completely different story. A lot of stuff changes. In the cartoon, like Snake Eyes is an afterthought almost, and you never see him and Storm Shadow interact. Whereas in the comics, they're almost like brothers. Like I'm not going to go into their whole story, that would take up too much time in this video, but let's just say there's a lot of the story centers around Snake Eyes and his relationship with Storm Shadow, the reason why Cobra Commander hates him, the reason why Baroness hates them. None of this stuff gets touched on in the cartoon. Let's see what else. Cobra Law never happens in the not the cartoon. Cobra Law never happens in the comics. A whole bunch of other details, like things are different. Again, we got this whole parallel universe, this whole alternate timeline thing going on with the same characters, with the same series. So what that led me to realize is, and this has happened with everything changes. Whenever something, and I said this before, but just with a different understanding now, everything that changes, everything that goes from one medium to another, something is going to change. Nothing stays exactly the same. Even with, like, say with manga, with anime, like there's a manga version of Dragon Ball Z, there's a manga version of Sailor Moon, there's a manga version of a lot of your animes that you may watch. A lot of them, I think, and I say I think because I don't read manga, but I've browsed through a few pages of a few before, and it looked like it was like an almost page for page translation of what I saw on screen. But even that, there's little details that get left out. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, I've watched Lord of the Rings, all the movies. I did not read the books. I watched that one Hobbit movie that came out, and there was a Return of the King movie that came out, animated, that was made by the same people that made The Hobbit. So I knew of Lord of the Rings, so I knew it was a thing, and I was enough to be excited when the movies came out, but also knew they were books, and I figured, okay, something's got to be different. And I'm pretty sure those of you who are watching this, if you read the books before you watched the movies, you probably could tell me a crap ton of things that are different. Everything that gets translated into a different medium, there are going to be changes, and nothing stays exactly the same for various reasons. And once that light bulb went off in my head that this has always been happening, that this has always been a thing, and it will always continue to be a thing, that kind of got me grounded a little bit more. That kind of got me to a point where I'm like, you know what? I may not like every change that happens, but there are going to be changes, and that's really the point I'm making today, is that there are going to be changes when your thing gets changed into a different type of thing, and you just got to roll with it. You're not going to like every change, you're not going to hate every change, but understand that something always has to change. Now, this kind of gets into the changes I like and the changes I don't like, or the types of changes I like and don't like. Not everything translates well to screen, not everything translates well to TV, not everything translates well to video game, all that kind of stuff. So in those cases, I understand why things get changed, or so the source material comes out in one time period and the movie comes out in a different one. Like Transformers, the cartoon and the comic came out in the mid 80s. The movie came out in the mid 2000s. There's things that got to change there. Like Starscream, I understand why Starscream was an F-15 fighter jet in the comics and the cartoon, but he's a I believe it was no, not F-17, F-22 Raptor. I think it was an F-22 Raptor. I will correct that in the captions if I get that wrong. But yeah, you had to update that, because if the theme is robots in the skies and you're doing this in the mid 2000s, I think it came out in 2006 or 7, 2006, I think. If it came out, if you're doing 2006 and you got a fighter jet that's an F-15, which is obsolete at that point, they're gonna go, wait, why is there an F-15 flying around? You have to update that to the most recent, the most up-to-date fighter jet. Optimus Prime, I was not upset at Optimus Prime being not being a cab over engine truck. I was not upset at him having some blue flame or some flame decals on him, like having just an updated look. I wasn't upset at Ironhide being a big truck instead of a minivan. Like, who's gonna take a minivan seriously in a robot on robot battle? Like, what, you're like, oh, is this a soccer bomb rolling up on me? Like, I understand those changes, so there are changes like that are necessary. Changes like Scarlet Witch in the MCU, not wearing like that leotard and like all the other kind of stuff she was wearing. Like, I understand the updated look, because you look at it now, if you saw someone in real life wearing that, you like, that's a little cringeworthy there. So things like that, like, I get why those changes happen. Now, there are certain changes I don't like, which is like when you just slap a name on a character. You gotta, like, this character is the same character in name, but not in the essence of the original character. Like, oh, that's supposed to be such and such, but they don't look like them, they don't act like them, they don't have the same powers, all that kind of stuff. I don't like those changes. I don't like when people make changes because they think they gotta draw in new fans. I'm like, yes, you gotta draw in new fans, but new fans don't know any better. Like, this thing doesn't need to be different just for the sake of being different. Like, if you can change it and make it different, cool, but don't change something that is going to alienate the original fans, the fans that make this even, the fact that you have these fans over here, that made it possible for you to even have a thing that's so popular to make a movie about in the first place. So don't go changing this thing that's going to piss these people off just to say, oh, we've got to bring these new people in. These new people don't know any better. They're not going to know that this was changed for their benefit. So those are the types of changes I don't like, but I understand that that's not going to be a big point of contention for other people. That's just what I personally like and don't like. Somebody else is going to be pissed off about, Bumblebee being a Camaro, whereas I was fine with that because that was an update. Nobody's going to take a Volkswagen Beetle seriously in a live action movie, or at least I didn't think at the time. Whereas, I was cool with that. The same changes I don't like, somebody else will like, and vice versa. Again, just saying, there are going to be changes. You're going to like some changes. You're going to not like other changes. Just understand that is always going to be a thing. It's always been a thing. There's no reason to, fill the creators' inboxes with hate. There's no reason to try to drive them off of social media, all that kind of stuff. Oh, the other type of change I don't like is when someone, and I'm going to touch on this some more with the X-Men video that I'm going to do. The other kind of change I don't like is when the director or the creator of the movie feels like their vision for this is more important than the source material. I get making tweaks here and there, but when you just say, oh, what I have in mind is more important than what's already out there, I just feel like that's nothing but arrogance. Like, if you're doing fan art, fan fiction, cosplay, like a fan-made movie, fan-made video, by all means have your own vision. That kind of stuff is cool. When you're doing a movie, an official movie from a franchise, and there's an established fan base, there are people who are going to be paying money to come see this movie, I feel like you got to stay true to what's out there. So that's one more thing that the type of change I don't like, when the director makes all these changes to match their own vision, where their own vision is so far off from what the source is. Speaking of source material, let me touch on this real quick. I know when you have this may or may not really be a side track from from my original topic, but I think it's worth talking about. You know, you got people who grew up with the source material, then you got the movie that comes out, and then you got people who become fans because of the movie. I'm totally in support of this. I used to be this person, but I've grown. I'm not this person who says, oh, well, you're not a real fan because you only came in on the movies and that's all you know about. You are a fan. You're a fan. If you're that person still saying that these other people aren't fans simply because they only came in on the movies or the new version of it, cut that out. Stop gatekeeping. I got plenty of videos on gatekeeping, so I'm gonna stop there on that. But you know, those new fans came in whenever they came in. You know, we all start somewhere. What I do think needs to happen, though, there does need to be some grace and humility on both sides of this coin. For people who are the OGs, they grew up with the source material of this thing, you know, I think it can be a little arrogant and off-putting for us to be like, well, if you read the comics, then you know, blah, blah, blah. If you read the comics, like, let those people love this thing in the way that they love it. Let them love it at where they're at right now. Okay, don't beat them over the head with, oh, well, this happened here. I mean, if you're genuinely, like, if it comes up in conversation and someone's asking, hey, why is this way? Or, wait, I saw this, but then I saw that this was like this. Like, okay, this is because the comics did it this way. Like, I get if you're talking about like that, but like, don't beat this is how the comics were. Don't beat them over the head with, oh, this is how the comics were, or condescend to them because they don't know what happened in the comics. So I feel like there's some grace that has to be had there. But on the flip side of that, you know, if you're someone who's just now coming in, yes, you are a fan. What I don't like about them sometimes is that a lot of people who are new tend to act smart alecky. They tend to act like they know everything about the thing. I'm like, no. You are still a fan, but don't come in acting like you know everything about this and be dismissive of what was already out there. It's okay to not like it. It's okay if you don't like what the source material was. Like, if you say, hey, speaking of Bumblebee, like, you know, my Bumblebee isn't, you know, like if someone could see new Bumblebee, you know, they came in on new Bumblebee and they see old Bumblebee and like, wait, that's not my Bumblebee. I get that. That's totally fine. But don't say old Bumblebee is trash. Don't say, oh, old Bumblebee, that's just invalid. Like, that came before you. New Bumblebee exists because of old Bumblebee. I never forget, there's this YouTube series called Kids React, where adolescents and teenagers, maybe even some elementary school kids, they are shown something from well before their time and they react to it. And there was a Transformers episode, and of course the kids were looking at the older versions, and going like, what the heck, this looks nothing like what I'm used to seeing. And that's understandable. I get that. The one reaction that pissed me all the way off, and yes, I'm getting into my get off my lawn side here, so y'all bear with me. This one kid saw a picture of the original Optimus Prime and Michael Bay Optimus Prime, and he just shook his head like, he would never have a gun. I'm just telling you now, he would never have a gun. Man, if you don't sit your little whippersnapper. Okay. I told y'all I was getting into my super old fanboy get off my lawn mode there. And yes, I understand that I'm getting pissed off about something a 10-year-old said. I get it. Y'all gonna forgive me for a moment. I'm like, okay, it's one thing if you were to say, that's not my Optimus Prime. That's not the Optimus Prime I know. I don't know him to look like that. That's totally fine. But for you to say, and again, I know I'm talking about a 10-year-old and I'm going off on a 10-year-old right now. for you to say he would never have a gun when somebody is literally showing you what the original looked like, stop sitting there trying to act like you're the expert on it. And that's really what, again, that's what kind of ticks me off about when new fans come in. I'm totally welcome, I totally want new fans to come in. I want them to enjoy it. I don't feel like they have to enjoy what used to be there. Just don't on what used to be there. Just don't be dismissive of what used to be there. Like if I for instance, I'm not a big DC fan. I'm not a big, not even a big Suicide Squad fan, but I have come to like Deadshot. Doing my research on Deadshot, I know Deadshot didn't always look like he looks now. I don't like old Deadshot. I don't like how Deadshot used to look. I don't like how even the newer version of him that existed before the movie came out. If I cosplay Deadshot, I'm gonna cosplay Suicide Movie Deadshot, because I'm not about to wear a top hat. That don't look good to me. And I think the more current version of Deadshot looks too much like Deathlock from, I believe I'm getting that name right. I believe he looks too much like Deathlock from Marvel. So I wouldn't cosplay that version of him, because I just feel like that looks too different. So I do acknowledge that Deadshot used to look like that. That's the original Deadshot. He's the original. He's the OG. That he needs to be respected. But I just don't like it. I respect people who do like it. I'm not gonna crap on old Deadshot, but that old Deadshot just ain't for me. So yeah, at this point, I'm pretty much done making the whole point. Like I said, I got to the point where I realized that everything always changes whenever when the medium change. Some things, some details about the thing change with it. There may be drastic changes, there may be minor changes, there may be changes you like, changes you don't like, changes I like, changes I don't like. But I'm really just saying, be acceptive of these changes. I'm saying be mature about your response to these changes. Don't be all outraged, nerd raging over stuff, and cursing out the creators and stuff because this thing got changed, because that thing got changed. Just know that something's gonna change when your thing becomes a movie, and you may like it, you may not. That's it. Anyway, y'all be on the lookout for the X-Men video I'm going to do, basically just going over, just getting it again, not to contradict what I just said in this whole video, but just to get it all out of my system, so to speak. All the stuff that I felt got incorrectly changed or done wrong in the X-Men movies. I may do Transformers and G.I. Joe. We'll see how long it takes me to do this X-Men video, how long once I get done with that, I'll reassess and say, and I don't know if I'm really gonna do this or not, or I still do this. Anyway, that's it. Y'all have a good night. Y'all have a good time at whatever con you're going to next, whenever that is, whenever COVID, whenever Rona says we can go to cons again. Good luck on your cosplay builds. Please hit that like button, that subscribe button, that share button, leave me some comments, and I will see y'all at the next video. Peace.